Welcome to LearnWake. This is Brandon Judd, and today I'm going to be responding to a backroll attempt, a few videos here that has been uploaded by user eburka2. And this here, he's got a pretty decent sized description here. So before I get into that, this backroll, Eric, this is really good. And you're way closer than you think you are. So thank you for sending this video in, and thanks for the description. I'm going to read through this really quick just so our other members can see what you're thinking, and so you can kind of see that I've absorbed all the information here. So first thing you say is, I would imagine that LearnWake and its viewers are tired of hearing about backrolls, which is not true, because the more we put up about backrolls, the more people watch it, so don't feel bad. But I just can't get the landing on this trick. I know as I come down I need to pull the rope with both hands to my left, but I never have ample line tension. And we're going to get into that a little bit. That is a common feeling that you need to fix it that way. So you don't actually need to pull the rope with both hands to your left, which can be done if you have the line tension kind of subconsciously, but it's not required. There's another way we can get through to this, so don't worry on that. I have struggled for so long to get my approaches correct, and I feel like I'm sitting down before hitting the wake, probably killing the line tension. Now, this isn't terrible. This is a more advanced way of doing it, actually, by sitting and then pushing. You're just using a lot of legs, which is not terrible, but it does result in freeing up a lot of line tension. So if you were to grab the trick or do a handle pass with a rotation in it, then you're actually doing it fine. So I don't really have a problem with that per se. You might want to mellow it out a little just because you're making it hard for yourself, but I wouldn't get too hung up on that. The next thing is I start out with a slow progressive approach, but then I feel like I need to load it up and almost get perpendicular to the boat. Now this is an issue. So we can correct that. And what this does, feeling like that needs to happen, this actually makes you start releasing early, which puts you over the tail when the wake is pushing at you the hardest, which makes your flip harder to control. So that's the issue with that, even though you are pretty perpendicular to the boat when you do actually take off for the back roll. So don't overthink that one. I'll get to that fix here in a little bit once we see it happen on the video. I'm wondering if this is a natural habit that feels correct to the body as far as balance. I can load and release when I'm closest to the wake by leaning back and accelerating into the wake by getting good pop based upon the low speed being close to the wake. I'm wondering if it wouldn't help out to start out further to get the speed up. So the speed is actually a variable you don't really need to make this happen. The only thing that speed does for you is it takes you across the wakes in a more aggressive lateral travel. So if your wakes are really, really wide, then you might need to come in a little faster. That's really all there is to that. So I wouldn't worry about speed making the flip happen. You can do a back roll taking off and landing in the exact same position if a perpendicular roller was to come down your line, right? Like if you were to drive a double up but not hit the double up where it's converging with the wake, instead you were to edge out away from the wakes and just hit a roller and do a back roll, which I've done and I've seen plenty of people do plenty of times. They'll just kind of pump the first two rollers and then they'll do a back roll off of that last roller, and they won't travel laterally. They'll just be straight up and down. So you don't need the speed to make the back roll function. You only need it so that you're not casing the wake, so you're going wake to wake. So I wouldn't worry about that part. Let that escape your mind and don't think about it too much. The rest of it, we'll give you some other things to focus on. Based upon the distance that I've been starting into the wake, I feel like I need to load it up. So that's why I naturally hit it hard halfway through the approach. And that may be true in the sense that you feel like you need to overcompensate where you don't necessarily need to. You might get this kind of, what I mean by that is this kind of leads into your need to, your desire to start edging into the back roll because you feel like you're not getting enough load and pop and everything, that gives you a tendency to start rotating early. And like I mentioned before up here, if you're rotating the back roll off of the tail of your board, you're in less control when you get the majority of your pop. So this tendency of like you feel like you need to load it up a whole lot is just going to make you rush. So don't worry, just relax and the physics will work for you. The next thing you say here is, I've worked on getting my shoulders behind my hips and leaning to create line tension, but I just can't work out this bad habit. It's kind of weird how this part of it functions. Sometimes if you just think to yourself, I'm going to get my shoulders behind my hips, that doesn't always do it. But if, for example, thinking about like standing tall or something against the line, that might get your shoulders behind your hips, if that makes sense. So sometimes thinking about something different may fix the actual physics of your body position. So don't worry if if thinking about getting your shoulders behind your hips is not helping, then don't worry about it. We can attack this another way. And then any thoughts beyond what you have all already posted multiple times? I've watched them all. Thanks in advance. So first of all, thanks for being an avid member and watching everything we do. We appreciate that. We often wonder how many people really pay attention to this stuff. So this is great to hear. Another thing is, I noticed in your profile that I believe you're an engineer for a living, which means that you're probably pretty analytical about it. And I'm the same way, which is why I get into all these details with everyone. So the biggest issue for people who are very analytical is your brain doesn't have the ability to really process every single part of your back roll all at once. So if you're thinking, okay, my knees need to be here, my hips need to be here, I need to lean at this point, I need to start standing up at this point, I need to push my legs all the way tall here, I got to make sure my hips are in front of my shoulders here, I got to wait here, and then once I'm here, I got to look this direction, push the handle this direction, time the landing of the, like, your brain is not going to be able to do that. So what we need to do is we need to translate all those thoughts that are going on in your head into feelings. Once it's a feeling, you don't have to think about it anymore. Just like bouncing a basketball. If you've done it a bunch of times, you don't have to think about catching the basketball with your hand. You just kind of push it rhythmically, right? It's a feeling you have. So it's the same kind of thing when you're just sorry, I'm tongue-tied here. When you're just carving and edging around, like making nice S turns just comfortably. Once you get that comfortable, you're no longer thinking. It allows your mind to actually focus on something else, and your body just gets into habit. So we're going to work on finding the right feeling that you need in this back roll and forgetting all the other details, because those details can actually stop you from landing it because you're going to be overthinking stuff. So it's a very common issue. So hopefully I can break it down so that we can free your mind from having to think about it. And I'll let you know, starting out with the things you're doing great. And those are things you don't have to think about anymore. So I'm not super concerned about your edge out and your edge back in. It's not terrible. Ideally, when we teach people, we do have them go out about halfway out from where you're going, so that it forces them to stay tall and really load. But your back roll is already pretty consistent in that it's consistent flip. You're always getting back to your feet. You're always getting back to the other side of the wake pretty consistently. So I wouldn't worry too much about this. So instead, here's what we're going to worry about. And shortening your approach may help if you feel like it's going to help you mentally do that. So here's the thing: is there's two aspects. One is your landing position is different than I think you think it is, and then your takeoff position is early. So we'll find a way to slow this down so that you can get the right pop to where you're more comfortable in the air, and then we'll talk about the landing position here in a minute. So the first is your takeoff. I don't have a problem with this because I think that your hips are more forward than your shoulders, even though you're using a lot of legs, which is great. So right here, this is where I'm starting to have the issue. You can see your board is already starting to sweep through the wake and go into the back roll. So by the time your board leaves the wake, you're going to be pretty darn tilted. So you can see here, you're already like your back fins are almost coming out of the water. Let me kind of go back to that really quick so we can take a closer look. it almost looks like I can see more of the tail of the board than I can see of the nose of the board here. So it just looks like you're turning front side a lot, like you mentioned, perpendicular, and then you're also uh, driving the nose into the back roll before you've gotten most of your pop. Like you're already kind of at a 45 here, and then the tail of the board has just left the water, and you're almost horizontal. So this isn't terrible. It's a little worse than some of your other videos that you added, but it is a little early. So what happens is when you're in this position and you get most of your pop, it's more out of control because the wake is going to be pushing your lower body up, which just flips you fast, not necessarily up. So you'll watch in Kyle's version here, which I'm sure you've seen a bunch. In this version here, he doesn't start flipping really quickly. He waits and loads it up nice and hard all the way through the wake. Like here, he's still pretty upright, a lot more upright than you were. And then as his tail leaves the wake, he gets to a similar position as you do, but he goes up, and then at the peak of the trick, he's able to kind of get most of his rotation out of the way, and then it'll slow down for the landing, which we'll get back into here in a minute. So let me cue that up. All right, so looking back at yours, you're just starting a little early, and then what that does is it makes you a little less confident on the landing, which honestly is really good. This is the best one. The first video you submitted was the best one of the three. And it looks like you're pulling your arms into your chest in an attempt to try to bring the handle in closer to you to regain your line tension so that you can pull it toward your lead hip to stop you from rotating front side a bit. And you can see here you've rotated 90 degrees front side and then slipped out over your heels. So just for video's sake, we'll watch these other descriptions we'll watch these other videos and read the descriptions. So this here says another clip of the back roll. One of these videos that I'm posting depicts an ollie pop, which has improved based upon the fact that I'm trying to keep my shoulders behind my hips, but it still lacks some pop. So the lacking of pop is only because you're starting to go a little early into the flip. So just be patient on that. Simply said, just wait longer until you start flipping, edge through the wake more. See here, you're already at the position that Kyle was in when his tail was coming off the wake, and now the nose of your board is at the top of the wake instead of the tail. So by the time the tail leaves the wake, I can see the top sheet of your board, whereas in Kyle's example I could see the bottom sheet of his board. Let's go to that real quick. So I'll pause it to that spot where his tail is still kind of in the wake. So see how much of the bottom of the board I can see? This is because he's waiting and saving that load all the way through the wake and letting the wake kind of get him up into the flip instead of rocking over his tail really hard so that it sends you kind of into this 45-degree angle with your top sheet of your board showing. And that's what's making you lack pop. Don't worry about the approach. I think you're doing fine on the approach. I think if you just tell yourself to be as patient as possible, that should fix that. And that's why you cased the wake here, but everything else was good. All right, and then in this last one, it says, third video, sorry for the multiple video posts as I'm trying to figure out how to combine them. So what you can do, just to answer that quickly, you can actually go down here underneath the description in the comments, and you can add a comment with the YouTube URL, and when I go into the original video, into the description, I'll see the comments below, and I can just address it all right here. So that's probably the easiest way for you. That way you don't have to go through a submitting process of all of these videos. So let's get onto this one. This one is also pretty good in that you land in the right spot, but just over rotating. And again, this one you kind of blast through the wake because you're doing that like a side-to-side version of the rocking horse rock, just too aggressively, and and too quickly. You're not allowing yourself to get the pop you need, which flips you kind of uncontrollably, so that at this point you're a little uncomfortable in the air, although you land in the right position and perfectly upright. It's just the takeoff makes you uncomfortable so that you don't have the right positioning here at the landing, and then you over rotate and slip out. So I have a drill for you that I want you to do, and I had a another analysis video recently on a scarecrow where I did a similar type thing. But what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you edge on your heels, one-handed. You can do this one-handed and two-handed, actually, now that I think about it. So this is going to help fix your landing position. Before I go into this drill too deeply, let's talk about the landing position you should have. So if you're patient enough like Kyle is here, you'll land more over top of the board. And I know he brings the handle out to stop himself, which is the easy way. But it's also a mentality change, right? Like a feeling you're trying to replicate. So the feeling he's trying to replicate is landing back on the balls of his feet instead of on his heel side edge hard. So what he does is he takes the back of his board, the tail of his board, and he swings it underneath him. You'll watch this back foot really go underneath him, and he uses the line tension to leverage that back underneath him, whether or not he's realizing that's what he's doing, because the feeling is a gentle landing on the balls of his feet. So you'll see that is getting swung underneath, and then when he lands, you can see it even more exaggerated there. So you can see his back foot is further behind his front foot. And that's what allows him to land comfortably, sort of halfway between a neutral edge and a hard edge, in this just comfortable, mellow heel side edge with very little lean. And that will help you control it, because if he was to over-rotate, he would just land on his toes. And if he was to not rotate enough, he would just land edging on his heels harder. So right now, if you over-rotate, this back foot is in front of you, and it blows out into this front side rotation. So you just got to find a way to swing that back foot underneath you. And you can do it with two hands or one hand, but it's more of a feeling that you want to find on your landing. You're going to anticipate landing on the balls of your feet with your feet more in line with the rope, and with the path of the boat, rather. So let's go back to this again, and we'll talk about this spot here that I want you to practice this drill. So one-handed and two-handed, you're going to practice it both ways. I want you to edge, and I want you to do a little inside-out jump in a nice kind of tall, stiff position. And when you land, I want you to land on the balls of your feet, and I want you to carve back up the wakes. I want you to carve back up so that you get a little bit of a toe side pop almost. And I want you just to practice that so that you can understand how to swing the tail underneath your body and get your board landing more with the nose of the board pointed toward the boat. So nice little pop with a lot of lateral travel, and you're going to land with the board pointed neutrally, pointing toward the path of the boat, and then you're going to turn back on your toes toward the wakes. So what this is going to do is it's the exact opposite of your overturned front side rotation. You're actually learning to land neutral and then bring it a little backside, which is going to put you in a toe side edge. So that position is what I want you to think about and practice it 3 or 4 or 5 times until you're pretty comfortable, both with one hand and two hands. And then when you are more patient at the wake and you come in with a lot more patience, and then you hold your board in between you and the wakes, you're like, as you're edging, the board's in front of you, right? And you're going to hold that board in front of you as you're edging through the wake, and you're going to keep it somewhat underneath you and in front of you instead of letting it squirt out to the side of you so aggressively. So you're going to hold that position nice and patient, get good pop, and then when you spot the water to come around for the landing, I want you to think about landing back on the balls of your feet like the drill. So take off being nice and patient, and then land like the drill. And all you have to think about is those two feelings. Is you want to edge in and wait for the feeling of that good solid pop, as patient as you can handle, and wait as long as you can. Anytime I've ever done a back roll, I don't know that I've ever been too patient on a back roll. I don't think I've ever let myself do that. So see if you can flirt with being too patient and standing against the line almost the whole way through. And then on your way down, all I want you to do is remember what the feeling was of that drill and mimic the feeling. So that way you have less things going on in your head. Because the more things that are going on in your head, the more variables you're going to try and toy with, so you can figure out which one is right and which one's wrong, which puts you in this, very different, inconsistent back roll every time. So let's just talk about the takeoff feeling and the landing feeling and see if we can combine the two of those into one correct back roll. So anyhow, I know that was kind of a lengthy explanation, but it sounds like you're pretty analytical about how you do, so I wanted to break it down very thoroughly for you. But you're really, really close. Your back roll's good and nice and big, and everything is really good with the exception of the takeoff and landing positions, and you're thinking a little too much. So find those feelings, and you'll be good to go. If you have any other questions, you can hit us up. I guess on your original page here, you can hit us up underneath the description in the comments. You can add a comment, ask us questions, or you can record another video of you working on this and implementing those things, and we can analyze that one. Thanks again.